At a restaurant, a lady just asked the waitress if the salmon was grass-fed. I literally have no idea what went wrong in the world. Well, during the time of Pope St. Pius V, there was a lot of challenges in the world when he became Pope. He was actually born in the year 1504 in Italy, born into a poor shepherd family. So he was worked as a shepherd as a young boy, which would be very appropriate since he would become the chief shepherd of the church. He would eventually become Pope. At the age of 14, he joined the Dominican order, made his vows, was ordained a priest around the age of 25, and for the next 16 years he taught philosophy and theology and helped with the education of the Dominican seminarians. But then he was chosen to be a bishop, and not long after that, a cardinal. When he was chosen to be Pope, he wept. He felt he was so unworthy for this position to be the chief shepherd of the flock, but he continued to live his life of poverty and chastity in the papacy. He would not wear the royal robes of the Pope. He would wear his simple white Dominican habit. And for the last 500 years, every Pope has continued to wear the white cassock in commemoration of Pope St. Pius V, who was the first one to wear the white garment. When he became Pope, the Protestant revolt had taken place a few years before with Henry VIII taking England out of the church, and then Martin Luther and Calvin and Zwingli and all the millions of people that revolted from the church at that time. We also had the Ottoman Empire, the Turks, Muslim Turks coming up from northern Africa. They had taken Constantinople in 1450, and now they had taken the island of Cyprus, which was governed by Venice, and so they had reached the very borders of the Mediterranean. We know that the Pope would do his very best to help strengthen the church and bring about the Catholic Reformation with Charles Borromeo and others to help truly reform the church. So the way he reformed the church when he became Pope, and he was only Pope for 6 years, and yet I believe he was one of the greatest popes in all of church history. The first thing he did was implement the Council of Trent and to help write the Catechism of the Council of Trent and distribute that throughout all of Christendom. He reformed the church and religious orders. He made sure that bishops were living in their diocese. Many bishops would only visit their diocese once or twice a year. They were living in the French Riviera or some other place, in other summer palaces, but he made sure that the bishops had to live in their diocese and truly be the shepherd of their diocese. He would establish the first seminaries to make sure that the priests were well educated in philosophy and theology, and especially St. Thomas Aquinas, whom he declared a doctor of the church. We know that the Pope would hold many synods to help reform the church. He also reformed the breviary, which is the prayer book that priests and deacons read. He reformed the Roman Missal, we call that the Sacramentary, the Roman Missal. And then he would establish CCD, the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, all over the world to teach children the faith and the confraternity of Christian doctrine. All this he did in just 6 years. He also excommunicated Queen Elizabeth of England for persecuting Catholics in her country, especially hunting down and killing so many priests in England at that time. But the greatest challenge he had was the Ottoman Empire coming up from northern Africa, and a great battle would take place on October 7th, 1571. We now know it as the feast day of Our Lady of the Holy Rosary. It was called the Feast of Our Lady of Victory. I would encourage you to read about the battle. There's some great stories and videos about it on YouTube. The Battle of Lepanto, which was the largest naval battle in the history of the world up to that point, with hundreds of ships of the Ottoman Turks coming, and then the Pope had gathered his own, what he called the Catholic League of the Union of the Papal Fleets, as well as Venice joined him, and Genoa, and Spain, and Don Juan of Austria, a heroic man who led the battle for the Christians. They all went to Mass and confession. They even had Mass on the Christian ships before the attack. And there was a great victory for the Christians, even though The Christians were badly outnumbered. It was really a miraculous victory to stop the advance of the Ottoman Empire. If they had won that battle, all of Europe would have become Muslim. So this was the greatest Christian victory in the history of the church up to that point. And we know that Don Juan of Austria had an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe on the ship with him, and Pope Pius V had asked all of Christendom to pray and fast and pray the rosary for the protection of Europe, the protection of Christian Europe. And so the great victory took place, and the Pope was actually meeting with his cardinals in Rome, and at the decisive moment of the Battle of Lepanto, hundreds of miles away, the Pope was revealed miraculously that the Christians had won. And so he declared this October 7th, the feast day of Our Lady of Victory, the Holy Rosary. So it was a great victory that he attributed to our Blessed Mother. The Pope would die at the age of 68 in the year 1572, canonized in 1712. Yet, in my opinion, one of the 5 or 6 greatest popes in the history of the Church, along with, of course, St. Peter, Leo the Great, Blessed Pius IX, St. Pius X, and John Paul II, I think are some of the greatest popes in the history of the Church. So I'll give you a blessing now with the relic of Pope St. Pius V, the great Rosary Pope, and who helped to save Christian Europe during the 16th century. To the intercession of Pope St. Pius V, may Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.